Circle. Well, for many new parents, getting your little one to sleep can be a challenging and frustrating time for everyone in the home. And the consequences of interrupted and insufficient sleep are disabling. 1 in 3 families experiences a problem with settling their little ones. So if you've tried all the tricks in your nappy bag and you've read all the books to no avail, then maybe sleep school is what you need to break the cycle. Let's have a look at one mum's experience.
My first experience at Masada was coming with my first son, Max. He was an absolutely horrendous sleeper. I was just totally and utterly exhausted. I was not able to function anymore. Couldn't continue on, couldn't go further. It couldn't get any worse. So we came in, they went through what he should be doing, of which I laughed in their faces and told them that Max would never do that. And 5 days later came out with a child that slept 6 hours during the day and 12 hours at night, and it was life-changing for me.
Masada is known in the community to offer a multidisciplinary team that can look at sleep settling for the baby as well as support and medical wellness for the woman.
You speak to psychiatrists here about any anxieties that you're going through. As a first-time mum, you don't know what the cues are, so he'd make any noise at night or during the day and I'd go running in and he wouldn't understand what settling himself was. One of the big things that they told me, especially with Max, was what the different cries were.
The mums, when they come in, are always exhausted and usually not enjoying their experience as a mum. I think people perceive that somehow they've failed, or they feel a sense of guilt, or that they're not good enough.
They're just so reassuring. They build up your confidence that you go home knowing that you'll be able to do this at home on your own.
Well, you are not alone. What an important story. And importantly, if you don't have a sleep school near you, listen to this. We've got some help right now. To offer more inspiration and some comforting assurance, please welcome Masada's consultant clinical psychologist, Dr. Jane Fisher. Now, Jane, we love this segment. I've just been through this with my little girl. She's a sleeper, thank God. I've got my life back. Now, most importantly, can we talk about maybe self-settling, giving your child the gift to be able to put him or her to sleep? How do we do that?
Well, I think the first thing that's important is not to presume that it happens spontaneously. And one of the things we think is that when a baby's tired, a baby will just go to sleep. And this is actually an inaccurate belief. A baby needs the right environment in which to go to sleep. So they need a dark room, they need very predictable routines of care before you settle them to sleep. And importantly, they need to be put into bed awake and then given appropriate non-stimulating comfort so that they can just quietly learn how to experience going off to sleep and that you will safely come back when they wake up.
Now, you said a very important thing, non-stimulating, which I think a lot of people put them in and put the mobile on.
Exactly,
or
the toys in the bed or the distracting things in the bed.
So the comfort might be your presence?
The comfort is your presence, and we generally recommend very rhythmic patting. Not until the baby goes to sleep, but until the baby's quiet. And of course you have to use a safe sleep space for your baby and put your baby to bed on his or her back, but not to make eye contact with the baby, not to talk to the baby, just to make reassuring sounds that you're present.
What do you mean by rhythmic patting? Is that like 3/4 or 7/8 or
pace of a slow heartbeat?
Oh, really?
Like a slow heartbeat,
but
and use a cupped hand, a constant rhythmic patting
on their little chest.
Well, some babies like to be held firmly with one hand and patted on their legs or the lower half of their body, and some babies like to be patted.
Oh, it makes me want to cuddle a baby listening to you talk about it. Now, Jane, you also said something that I really liked, which was sort of following a routine prior to getting into bed. Now, first of all, should you follow the clock and go, okay, it's 5 o'clock, let's have a nice warm bath and wrap up and start working towards that and follow that every day?
That's a very good pattern with older children, having that evening soothing and settling routine. With a baby, you need to be very attuned to the baby's tired cues, and these vary. Some babies rub their eyes, some babies pull their ears, some babies start grizzling. And because there's an enormous focus on breastfeeding, women often presume that every bit of grizzle and cry means the baby's hungry, and they only have one thing to offer, which is the breast or the bottle. We don't think that being obsessed about time is important, but what we do think is you need to be mindful of separating feeding and sleeping. So if the baby's had a feed, had some playtime, and then they start grizzling, that's the time to begin some soothing strategies.
Can we talk, what was a revelation to me was that you need to put your baby in the cot awake. Which is something that sounds so simple, but I was nursing Molly Rose to sleep for too long, and then I would sort of do this and put her in, and then she'd wake, and I'm like, oh my God. And so where should we be? What I did was actually sit next to her, touched her. If she got upset, held her, but then put her down. Do you have a system at Masada that you follow?
Yes, and it's probably comparable to that. So we would recommend that for a young baby, a baby under 4 months, that they're wrapped firmly. It makes them feel secure. They're put in bed, and you stay until they're quiet, either patting them or with one hand on them. And then once they're quiet, you give them an opportunity to go off to sleep on their own.
What's the most recent thinking on the controlled crying debate, as in standing outside the door, listening to your baby crying and thinking, should I leave them a bit longer, that kind of thing?
It's a really important question. This, of course, is the big controversy. I don't think many expert practitioners use that term anymore, controlled crying. I think they prefer to think about ways of comforting a baby. And controlled crying implies that you're abandoning the baby. And nobody who's helping families at this life stage would recommend that. But what we do recommend is sustainable ways of learning to care for a baby. And that means that you have to give the baby some opportunities to learn to practice. So it might be that if the baby's grizzling, you don't go in immediately.
Professor, we want to keep talking to you. Do you mind sticking around for more chats here on The Circle?
Not at all.
All right, we'll be back with more. And if you've got a question, email it in super quick, and we'll hear from you live this Tuesday morning after this message from Marianne.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Dr. Jane Fisher about sleep school. Getting your little one to sleep, Jane, it can save a marriage in the end, because it's so tough when you all sleep deprived. Can we talk about pacifiers or dummies? Molly Rose has still got a dummy. Are you for or against them?
She's only 7 months old.
I think in general the approach we would take is that the things that a baby associates with sleep need to be sustainable. And if a baby uses a dummy but the dummy falls out frequently and so the parents are going in and out multiple times, then it's actually not that helpful.
Super glue.
That's right. But if the baby replaces the dummy themselves, then perhaps it's not a problem.
Okay.
But we would probably minimise the use of dummies, I would think.
Can we talk about really fussy babies? You know, the ones that just have an absolute tantrum, and it can go on for hours and hours, and mum and dad have both tried everything.
Absolutely.
What would you do in a situation where a baby's fussing?
Well, I think this is a really serious problem, and it often gets trivialised. People often get told, well, that's what looking after a baby's like, whereas in fact it has very serious consequences for both parents' health and well-being. We think probably one of the main reasons that babies fuss a lot is when they're overstimulated and overtired, but often this is a hard thing to understand and recognise. So one of the most important things is really to allow your baby sufficient opportunity for sleep. And this means, as I was saying, recognising the tired cues and giving the baby a very predictable pattern to the day. And it can be hard to establish this, and that's sometimes where professional services can be helpful. They can help us work out how to do it. But for someone who doesn't have access, that's what we would recommend, is that you try to provide your baby with more opportunities to sleep, and be very watchful that the baby's not being overwhelmed and overstimulated by lots of people, being passed from hand to hand, lots of toys.
Watching The Circle.
A second bath can work wonders.
That's what
even if 11 at night, you put them in the bath.
Just about to say a bath is even for adults now. Would you like
very
a bath?
soothing.
Would you like a bath? I wish we could have you on the show for 2 hours. I think it's such a great
thank you
subject.
very much indeed.
And I wanted to talk about the male perspective as well, but next time.
Next time.
Yes.
I'd be delighted to come back.
Thank you so much for coming on. Please thank Dr. Jane Fisher. So there, Jane. You're watching The Circle. All the details are on the website, and coming up, some serious Sicilian cuisine, Jane, in the kitchen, courtesy of Chef Dominic Rizzo. Back after this quick break. Don't go away.